I fell off a roof and had a lot of internal injuries. I punctured my lungs, punctured my spleen, dislocated 9 ribs on my left side of my body, and cracked some ribs. And see, what else was it? I dislocated my stomach from my diaphragm.
Your past determines your future and who you are in the present and the now. Most trauma comes from the childhood, and it can start as early as even in the womb. Because if your mother had traumatic experience while she was pregnant with you, you carry that in your genome through the epigenetics. So forgiveness is really, really powerful because you can break that emotional connection.
Whiskey and vodka were my go-to drinks to medicate my mental pain and my physical pain. The first drink was like a knife cutting in my stomach, as it was so hard on my stomach as it was already bleeding. But I had to do something to kill the pain so that I could sleep, so that I could go to work again the next day. And this is almost making me emotional to talk about this, but it was really real.
Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. Ever look up and see those dull, grey skies streaked with chemtrails, and you feel your energy sink? You're not imagining it. Something in you knows the sky isn't supposed to look that way. But what if you could bring back the blue? What if there was a way to clear the air inside you and above you? That's where the Chembo comes in. They create powerful orgonite, tools that generate orgone energy, the life force that helps neutralize EMFs from your mobile phone, your Wi-Fi, and even 5G. It's nature's way of restoring balance, bringing cleaner air, calmer energy, and deeper sleep. Every piece from the Chembo is handmade, from tactical tower busters to beautiful pyramids and jewelry, crafted with the precise ingredients to generate real orgone energy. And here's the best part. They've proven it. For over 10 years, they've cleared thousands of miles of chemtrails, bringing the blue back to the skies around the world. So if you're ready to take back your weather and your well-being, go to thechembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 for 10% off and experience the shift for yourself. Don't fear the chemtrails or the EMF. Be empowered with the Chembo and never feel helpless again. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned because we have some more great content coming soon. Most men don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're enslaved. Enslaved to anger they won't name, debt they won't face, and cravings for sex, money, and power they pretend don't control them. Hello friends, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave. Today's guest is Glenn Beechy, a man who left an Amish upbringing at 17 and still had to fight his way out of a deeper prison, years of rage, addiction, and a debt spiral that hit over $1 million. But this isn't a hustle story, it is a healing story. Glenn says real freedom isn't external, it's internal. It's forged through self-awareness, boundaries, forgiveness, and ruthless honesty. The kind that changes your marriage, your money, and the atmosphere your kids grow up in. So if you've ever looked sorted on the outside but felt like you're losing the war inside, this episode is for you.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why like it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, you know. Glenn, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
Very good, very good. Good to be here. Good to be here. We've tried this before. Hopefully today it'll work.
Yes, we've been having some teething technological challenges, and touchwood, we can finish this today because we just couldn't get it done the last time, you know. So, you know, reading your introduction, you have a very interesting story and doing research on you. And I thought it'd be quite interesting because I find that today a lot of men don't have a lot of positive role models, and we tend to focus on the wrong things. And I like to talk to men who have been through the fire, who have been through refinement, who can set an example and show men, look, you don't have to be perfect, but you just have to be willing to have the right attitude to overcome adversities in order to set an example, not only for yourself, but for your family and also for other men. Because I think that in today's world, we don't have enough men out there that other men can look up to say, okay, this guy is not perfect, but, you know, he worked hard, he made a comeback and worked on himself, you know. So you left the Amish world at 17. Before it gave you freedom, what did that decision tear away from you internally?
Man, that's a lot. It, you know, my main goal, if you will, when I chose to leave home at 17 years old was that I would leave my problems behind. You know, that was in my mind. It was, if I can get away from my parents, if you will, from under my mom and dad's roof, if I can just go live my own life and go do what I want to do, then all my problems would go away. And I could, you know, live the life that I want to live without being suppressed by religion and, you know, all the things that I was not able to do because I was in a very conservative religion, you know, growing up Amish like that. We weren't allowed to have technology, if you will. I mean, we had no electricity in our house. We didn't have the modern conveniences, and it was a very hard life to live. And we really didn't have any much connection to the outside world, if you will. You know, we didn't have TV, we didn't have radio, none of that. You know, we didn't really have connection to the outside world, and I wanted more connection to the outside world, right? You know, so what it tore away from me, I mean, when I left home, it showed me that is me thinking that I'm going to leave my problems behind by leaving home and going and living my own life. It showed me within 6 months later, even 3 months later, probably a couple 3 months later, I figured out that that's when my real problems began. Thinking that I had problems and that I had a hard life where I was at 17 under my dad's roof, a bed to sleep in, food to eat. I had to work hard every day. I had to work very hard, but that's when my problems began. A few months after I left home. I mean, the real problems set in. I moved in with my cousin and lived with him in his house and slept on his couch, for months. I slept on the couch. And then I finally bought me a twin size bed to sleep in, but I didn't have a bedroom. So I had to put the mattress in the living room because there was no extra bedroom. But yet I needed a place to stay because I left home. I left home with $10 in my pocket, with $10, 10 US dollars in my pocket, and a bag of clothes, a couple sets of clothes, and left. That's what I left with. So I had nothing, basically had nothing. I didn't have a job. I had a place to stay with my cousin on his couch, but that was it. I just, at that age, you don't think of real life problems. You think of all the fun that you're not having in life is what you think of at 17 years old. For myself, anyway, I was thinking of all the fun that I could be having if I could be away from the religion that I grew up in. I was thinking about all the modern conveniences that I could have if I could live in the so-called real world. I wasn't thinking about paying my rent and having a house to live in, having a job. I never had a job in my life besides work for my dad. I worked for my dad all my life up to 17 years old. He did concrete work, concrete construction work, and we lived on a farm. And we worked from sun up until sundown, and after sundown. We worked 12 to 15 hours a day, every day but Sunday. And life was hard. We didn't have, like I said, we didn't have electricity. We farmed with horses on the farm. We farmed with horses, and we did concrete work. We did it the hard way. We did everything the hard way because of the religion that we were. It was a religion. We didn't have modern equipment, if you will.
So no mixers for concrete.
We sometimes mixed concrete by hand if it was a small job, but other than that, we would if it was a big project, we would call the concrete plant. Have the concrete plant come in, and do like that. But there was times when we mixed it by hand. When we mixed concrete by hand, if it was a small project,
still hard work. Still hard work.
Yeah, in a wheelbarrow. Sometimes
concrete is heavy.
Yeah, and we would literally. We didn't have like a bobcat or a skid steer, with a bucket on it, like a tractor and scoop, to take the concrete. If we couldn't get right to the concrete project with the truck, the concrete, we would take it and fill a wheelbarrow out of the concrete truck and wheel it sometimes 20 feet to 100 feet, and it was crazy. It was crazy stuff like that, that we did because we didn't have the modern conveniences, and it was hard. It was hard. I mean, it was hard physically. And
I can imagine.
I remember it was a highlight if even once every 6 months, if my dad would allow us to go out to eat lunch at a restaurant. We didn't eat out much, like at a restaurant. My mom always packed our lunch, and we never ate out. Almost never ate out at a restaurant because that's what we did. My dad didn't want to eat out at a restaurant. He didn't want to spend the money. He didn't want to go out he just didn't see no need for it, to go, you know, take a break from being on the job site all day and go at a restaurant and relax a little bit. There was not. If we did, it was a major highlight.
Okay. So in your story, you say you left carrying anger and a desire for revenge. What made rage feel righteous at that stage of your life?
What made revenge feel righteous?
Yeah, because you had a lot of rage.
At that stage in my life, I felt like that if I could revenge my parents and my grandpa, because my grandpa was he was a preacher in the church, that in the religious setting that we were in. He was a preacher, so I had to watch what I did around him as well, because he would reprimand me, and because he was one of the preachers, and I just so badly wanted revenge on religion and on the culture, because of making my life so hard. I wanted revenge on my dad, my mom, my school teacher. I wanted revenge on all of my teachers, if you will, because somehow in my heart, I felt like if I can revenge them and get back at them and show them that I'm going to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it, by moving out, by running away from home, then that somehow gave me a sense of control, a sense of I'm going to do what I want. You're not going to tell me what to do anymore. It gave me a sense of confidence for a minute that I'm in control of what I do. But what I didn't understand is the real world. In the real world, where you got to have a job and support yourself with a paycheck and manage your money, and all those things. I didn't know how to manage money. I never had $100 to my name ever. I never had $100 to my name ever. I didn't know what it was like to have more than $10 or $20 at a time, because I never needed to. I knew how to work hard, and that's all I knew. I knew how to work hard. Physically, mentally, I knew how to work hard. But I didn't know anything else.
I see. And you've said that you love God, but want nothing to do with religion, because from your experience, religion brought bondage and even health issues. What did religion do to your inner world that people on the outside usually fail to understand?
Religion, it's such a complex thing. The thing that the way I separate it now is religion is, people mix religion and rules and man-made regulations and rules, etc., in with God, because somehow they think that you can't love God without following a whole bunch of rules and being part of a church and being a member of a church. You got to be a member of a church, and you got to follow all these man-made rules because the Bible says this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong, and they create a whole list of rules, if you will, to follow, so that somehow you're a better person by following all these rules. And then secondary is love God. And when I figured out later in my life that if you read the Bible for what it says and not put your own rules on top of God's rules, life is much better. Life is much better. I mean, it's what happens is in religion, we end up following a man of a leader of a church, if you will, and we forget that God, the creator of heaven and earth, is actually who we need to follow and who we need to love, not the dictator of the leader of a church. Not the dictator. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong. Going to church is a good thing, I believe, most of the time, if you have a good leader there at the church that's not a dictator, that wants, you were talking about sex, power, and money. I mean, it usually what happens, not always, but I've seen it happen many times, is in a church, the leader gets hungry for sex, power, and money. The three things that you can read in the Bible of King David, sex, power, and money were some things that took him down. And Solomon, Solomon in the Bible, he had more money he had so much money he walked on it. He made streets of gold, and in his city, he had so much that he had 700 women, but he was still not happy on his deathbed. If you read the Bible, on his deathbed, Solomon said it was all useless. All the women that he had, the power that he had, the money he had. He said it was all kind of worthless to him on his deathbed. He said it in the Bible, if you read the Bible. And that's what happens with religion. People get arrogant and prideful and egotistical, and they think that they can make all these rules and get people to follow them instead of follow God. And it creates chaos. It creates chaos when we follow man-made rules instead of God's rules, God's laws. Always say it like this. Men have rules, God has laws. You can't break a law, but you can break a rule. You can't break the law of gravity, right? You can't break the law of gravity. Try it. Try breaking the law of gravity. It's real.
I see your point. Yeah. The thing is, I find as well, is that with religion I'm going to just say, all religion is a cult.
Yeah.
And I get attacked for that. But if you look at the actual definition of a cult, and I've done a show before where I've gone into specifically all the attributes of a cult, and then you overlay it with the attributes of a religion, and they're one and the same. Charismatic leader, rules for him and rules for others. Same thing you talk about, power, sex, money. Then the other thing is absolute control. You're not allowed to question. So a lot of dogma in there. So this is why I'm very forceful against the idea of religion, and I think is the biggest con ever sold to humanity. And I do agree with you where God, and I take it to another level, I said the mother, father, God is really love, right? And we need to be that love so that we can understand the brilliance and our God self, because we are part spirit, right? We're not just the body, we're part spirit. And I think that religion takes us away from that and makes us focus on a man, person, an idea that doesn't actually give us freedom, happiness, or love. It just puts us in bondage, So your public work is built around helping people find their own true identity. How does a man know when he is living from truth rather than from conditioning?
That's a really deep question, and it's a good question. So, living from truth versus conditioning, it's, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you don't know right away, I should say, if you're living from truth or from conditioning, because you can be conditioned for truth. You can, but a lot of times in a cult or in a religion, in a religious background, growing up in religion, growing up under conservative setting, a lot of times truth and control are mixed together. And in the middle of control, you lose some truth. You lose what's really true and free. Because truth is freedom. Real truth brings freedom. It really does. Not always right away. Sometimes truth hurts, but usually later it brings freedom. Truth brings freedom. Knowing if you're living in the truth or living in conditioning, it took. I'll just say this: it took me years, and I'm still coming out of that conditioning that I was under a lot of my life, because I went back. I left home at 17, and then I went back when I was 20 years old. I went back to either 19 or 20. I think it was 19. Anyway, I left for a couple years, left the Amish culture, went and lived my life, but I went back into the church and became a member when I was 19. And I was in the Amish church again from 19 until about 12 years ago. About 12 years ago, I left, and I'm not planning to ever go back. I'm 45 years old now. Sometimes I got to think a little bit how old I am. Anyway, I'm 45 years old now, and the last 12 years, about 12 years ago, I left the Amish church completely, and don't have any plans of going back into it. But anyway, what I'm saying is most of my life, I was conditioned to be in that culture and under that religion. And there's still days now that I'm having to undo that conditioning to find the truth. Because conditioning is so real when it happens to you when you're a child. It's so real, and it's so harsh. It's so, whatever you've been conditioned to believe when you're a child growing up, it's really hard to undo that. One way that I know that I'm following the truth and not conditioning is when I have true freedom in my life. And what I mean by that is freedom in in my finances, in my business, in my marriage. And what I mean by that is I'm truly happy, and I am truly making society a better place. I'm not hurting other people mentally, physically, spiritually with my decisions that I make in everyday life. That is one way that I've figured out that I know that I'm living in true freedom, because I have the freedom to go. I have the freedom to travel the world when I want to because of the decisions that I made in my business, with financial decisions, business decisions. You have the freedom to go explore the world. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. And what I've learned is, if I sow bad seeds, I reap bad seeds. That's not what I want to do, because that creates pain and addiction and all those things. And that's not freedom when you're addicted. And I still to this day battle with some addictions that try to come back. My old addictions. I used to be addicted to alcohol. That's not living in truth. That's not freedom, being addicted to something. And I still to this day, like I said, I still deal with some of that to a degree. Sometimes it wants to come back and tempt me. And in my marriage, having great relationships and truly enjoying each other in my marriage and with my children, truly enjoying hanging out with each other and not hurting each other mentally, whether it's mentally or physically, having true relationships that truly bring joy to you and the other person. It's not a one-way street. And when it's a one-way street in a relationship, like my marriage used to be before I found true freedom, I was a narcissistic a-hole. I was narcissistic, very narcissistic, and I didn't really care about my children. I didn't care about my wife. Early in my marriage, that wasn't freedom. That wasn't living in the truth, because I hurt them by my decisions, because it was all about myself. That's not what the one true God wants. That's not what God wants. God wants you to live life for you and the other person, not just for yourself. You want a true relationship is both enjoying each other's company. And like, I would go buy alcohol before I would buy groceries for my children. I was satisfying myself. I was having fun, but I wasn't living in freedom.
Got you. So let's transition now to dive a little bit deeper into pain and addiction that you just mentioned there. So in your story, there are also internal injuries. You mentioned alcohol addiction, debt, and unforgiveness. Which one looked like the problem, and which one was quietly feeding the rest?
Which one was what?
Quietly feeding the others.
So unforgiveness and hatred, revenge was the quiet killer. That was quietly feeding the dark ball of energy that I was carrying with me. Unforgiveness was really the root. Unforgiveness and discontentment, hatred, revenge was quietly killing me for many years. And at 20 years old, in the year 2000, I started my own business in construction. And about a year into business, I fell off a roof and had a lot of internal injuries. I punctured my lungs, punctured my spleen, dislocated 9 ribs on my left side of my body, and cracked some ribs. And see, what else was it? I dislocated my stomach from my diaphragm, because your stomach, if you study that, your stomach is about the size of your fist. And it is held in place in your chest with muscle mass, kind of like tissue, muscle mass. It's held in place, if you will, with that. And I ripped it out of position when I fell off the roof in 2001. And I got up off the ground that day. I had 2 employees with me that day. I got up off the ground because I thought I was invincible. I mean, at this point, I was 20, almost 21 years old. And, in my mind, I was invincible because I'd never been hurt that bad, if you will. I had been through some accidents back when I was a teenager, but not like this. This was internal injury. And I didn't understand that when it's an internal injury like that, you don't, how would you say, you don't think that you're invincible, because my lungs, my spleen, my stomach were all damaged very much. My mouth filled up with blood instantly when I got up off the ground. I got up off the ground that day, and I was wearing a tool pouch, a tool bag around my waist. I was wearing a tool bag with a bunch of tools in it, and it had a lot of weight. So it made me land harder yet when I fell off the roof. I fell about 14 feet. And it it really sucked me down. It made me land harder than ever. So I got up, getting ready to go back up on the roof and go back to work. And one of the employees seen that I was coughing up blood. It was instant. As soon as I got up off the ground, my mouth was full of blood instantly. And I was going to go back up on the roof and go back to work. And one of the employees was right there, like right away. And he's seen. And I said, I'm fine. I'll be fine. Be fine. Leave me alone. I'm going to go back up on the roof. I got work to do. And they said, no, you can't go back up on the roof. Your mouth is filling up with blood. And I said, yeah, but it'll be fine. It's not that big a deal. I'm fine. I'm walking. I'm able to walk. I didn't break anything. I'm going to be fine. And we argued there for a few minutes, and my mouth, and pretty soon I had so much pain in my stomach. And I'm like, okay, all right. If you insist, I said, if you insist, okay, we can go to the hospital. Okay, all right, fine. So we did. They drove me to the hospital. We had to stop. We were 10 miles from the hospital when this happened. At the job site was 10 miles away. We had to stop several times on the way to the hospital so that I could get rid of all the blood that was filling up in my mouth constantly. Constantly filling up with blood. And I would just close my mouth. It would fill up. And then it'd be we'd pull over and stop. And it was crazy. It was a crazy experience. Anyway, we got to the emergency room, and my mouth kept filling up with blood. And it was terrible, horrible experience. I was in the hospital for a couple days, and they couldn't find anything really major wrong besides that I had my lungs punctured and my ribs were dislocated, but they didn't really do anything. They said they'll heal on its own. It'll heal on its own. You just got to give it time. Give it a couple weeks, and give it 2 or 3 weeks or so, and you'll be fine. You can go back to work. Just give it, just rest for a few weeks, and you'll be fine. Okay, so I did, and over the next 15 years. I had more health problems. I had a lot of health problems. Just constantly, I had indigestion all the time. I kept coughing up blood. For the next 15 years, I coughed up blood. Not a lot, but just once a week or sometimes twice a week. If I would do too much strenuous work, I would cough up blood and my ribs would hurt. I'd have to go to the chiropractor constantly. My ribs, I had 9 ribs that wouldn't stay in place for 15 years. Wouldn't stay in place, 9 ribs. And I would get some relief from a massage therapist and a chiropractor. But then it would always come back. I'd start coughing up blood again. And it got so bad. It was probably from 2001, about 16 or 17 years later, my indigestion got so bad I couldn't hardly eat anymore. I would throw up. It got to the point where I could hardly eat. Now, let me back up a little bit. During this time, from 2001 to 2006. Anyway, it was between 5 to 7 years later. I still kept my construction business. I still kept working as much as I could. I couldn't work every day because I had too much pain. I had so much pain, but what I would do to dull the pain was I got addicted to alcohol. And I would drink a lot of whiskey at night. Whiskey and vodka were my go-to drinks to medicate my mental pain and my physical pain, which then made my physical pain worse until I had about the third drink, and then it would numb it, right? I remember that like it was yesterday. I would drink whiskey and vodka. The first drink was like a knife cutting in my stomach because it was so hard on my stomach because it was already bleeding. My stomach was already bleeding and still injured from the injury and not healed yet. And I knew that, but I had to do something to kill the pain so that I could sleep, so that I could go to work again the next day. And this is almost making me emotional to talk about this, but it was really real. But I did this for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, really, that I was addicted to drinking whiskey because it would make so I could sleep at night and it would kill the mental and physical pain until the next day. Then I'd go to work and then I'd do it over again for years. I did that. It got so bad. My indigestion got so bad that I had to have hemorrhoid surgery because I ended up with hemorrhoids, a lot of hemorrhoids. And then I had bleeding hemorrhoids for years. I had bleeding hemorrhoids, bleeding out my rectum because my indigestion was so bad in my stomach that my intestines were raw, and just from all the alcohol, all the indigestion and the alcohol and all the things. And a couple years later, and I talk about this in my book because I wrote this book. A Warrior's Path to Freedom. And I talk about it in this book about some of my life experiences. And at this point in time, like 2007, 2008, a couple of years later, it just kept escalating. Things kept escalating. My marriage was horrible. At this point, my marriage was so bad. And we had like 3 children at this point. We had 3 children. And 2007, we had our 4th child. And talk a little bit about it in the book. I had an affair on my wife right during that time as well. And things got so far out of control. I found myself $1 million in debt in 2011. I was $1 million in debt. Bad debt. I owed people money all over the place. I had a very bad reputation for not paying my bills, for not paying people. And it was horrible. It was such a horrible situation I had gotten into.
So I've got a question then. So how did all of this unresolved physical pain shape your emotions, your behavior, and the man you were becoming at the time?
How it shifted my emotions was...
Shaped.
How it shaped them was I had no idea how I was going to get out of this situation. I had given up at that point. Like, I had given up on life. I had given up on ever enjoying life, ever, in any area of my life. I was a very hateful individual. I was very hateful. I was very revengeful. I was very rebellious at this point. I was super rebellious. Anything that I could do to be rebellious against any kind of rule or law, I would do it just because it fed into my emotion. It fed into my hatred It fed into my revenge. If I could do anything rebellious, I would do it. I looked for it. I looked for things to do that were rebellious and against any kind of authority. I didn't want anybody in my life that was going to tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. I was very rebellious at this point because it fed my addiction, if you will. And I got addicted to pain. I got very addicted to pain. And I didn't even know it. Didn't know it until 2023. In 2023, I got shown in a spiritual out-of-body experience, if you will. And I know not everybody believes in out-of-body spiritual experiences, but that's okay. This was my experience, and this is what I experienced. And I know what I seen, and I know what I experienced, right? So there's so much to this story, so much to talk about. I forget sections, so I got to go back a little bit. In 2011, when I found myself $1 million in debt, I decided that I'm going to go to this seminar. It was a business training seminar. And I thought, maybe I can get something out of this to help my marriage and help my finances. And maybe there is something that I can learn at this seminar that could help me be a better person, or maybe figure out how I'm ever going to pay off my debt, or how I'm ever going to save my marriage. I had nothing to lose. I'll put it to you this way. I had to, in my checking account, my business checking account, I would overdraw my checking account every week. I would get like overdraft charges in the mail from the bank every week because I didn't have any money. But I would still write out checks on my bank account, and then the checks wouldn't clear. And I had bad checks written out to quite a few people that the checks were bad, but I still wrote them out. I overdrawed my checking account to go to this seminar, to pay for my ticket to go to this seminar. And I went to this seminar. Me and my wife went to this seminar, and that's when everything switched for me. Everything changed around. Everything. My whole entire life switched. Everything changed. They talked about the power of forgiveness at this seminar in a way that I had never heard it taught before, ever. Nobody had ever taught me how to truly understand the power of releasing, letting go of your past, letting go of your past mistakes, letting go of your past addictions, letting go of your past mistakes, decisions, etc., and forgive yourself and forgive others. They taught me how to do that. They took me through a process of doing that, and I got so much relief from it, got so much clarity, so much mental freedom. And I kept going to these seminars over the years, and I still go to them to this day. We still go to these seminars to this day. They teach you how to go through a forgiveness process, and it's very how would I say, it's very freeing, but it's different than what you learn in church. In church, I never learned that, the power of truly releasing your past so that you can have a brighter future. And I figured out later, just a couple years ago, actually 3-4 years ago, I figured out finally that forgiveness is not a one and done thing. It's something that you have to continue to do. You got to continue to forgive yourself for your past mistakes. Like I had to do it.
Absolutely.
I had to do it hundreds and thousands of times already. And the more that I figure out that you got to make forgiveness a lifestyle, the more freedom I experience in every area of my life.
Now, I want to talk to you about something that might feel like a gear change. Stay with me. You know what genuinely frustrates me? Watching men who are spiritually switched on, doing the inner work, evolving their consciousness, reading the books, listening to the podcasts, but still completely lost when it comes to what they're putting into their body every single day. Still carrying weight they do not want, still operating below their potential, still letting food control them instead of the other way around. And here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. An awakened mind living in an undisciplined body is still a divided man. I've seen it too many times, and it bothers me enough to build something about it. So I created the Compound Body Training Custom Meal Plan, a done-for-you 4-week nutrition system built specifically around your body, your biology, your goals, and yes, your favorite foods. This is not a template. This is not a generic diet sheet somebody copy-pasted from the internet. This is your personal nutritional blueprint, designed around you, delivered to you, ready to follow from day one. Because if you want to take a do-it-yourself approach to your health and your sovereignty, this is the most powerful tool you can start with. Just go to compoundbodytraining.com/meal plan. The link is in the description below. Your body should reflect the standard you actually live by. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, because I always tell people that one of the biggest liberators a person from their past is to forgive themselves. Because forgiveness is the thing that actually allows you to break the energetic connection to the event. And if you are unable to speak about an occurrence or an event without becoming overly emotional and not being able to actually say the story, maybe for like teaching someone a lesson or something like that, it means that you've not actually forgiven yourself for it. And this is why Yeshua, he always talks about, my Father doesn't require your blood, he requires your mercy. And your mercy actually means forgiveness, you know? And when you're able to forgive, it means you can love. And you touched on it earlier in this conversation where you said you didn't really love yourself. You know, you didn't love you didn't love anything. You just were addicted to alcohol and stuff like that. And that puts you into bondage, because you have this never-ending cycle of hatred for yourself. So you hate your family, you hate your job, you hate your life, you hate money, you hate freedom, you hate everything, you know?
Yeah.
And then you become like the snake trying to eat its own tail, you know? And then you get a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what was alcohol doing for you emotionally before it started taking more than it gave?
You know, that's a good question. When it started taking more than it gave, what it was doing for me emotionally before I got addicted was it just made me happy. I mean, I've always liked alcohol. Like, I always liked alcohol, even before my accident, before I did it for a painkiller. But then it was just a social thing. You know, it was just a social, fun thing. It made me feel rebellious when I was 17, 18 years old. It made me feel in control of my own actions, because I was not allowed to drink alcohol at all, period, at all, when I was living with my parents, you know, when I was 17 years old, before I left home. I wasn't allowed to have alcohol, even a little bit. But I did sometimes, you know, secretly. So when I was able to have it after I left home, it made me feel in control of my own actions, just because I could do it, and my dad didn't tell me that I can't do it because he wasn't living with me. So it made me happy, and it made me feel confident. It made me feel in control of my own actions. And it was a social thing that I did also. I just did it on a social level on the weekends, and sometimes during the week a little bit. So it made me happy. But then after it became an addiction, when I got hurt, when I had all these internal injuries, it made so that I could sleep at night. It became way more than a social thing. It was way more than a social thing. It wasn't really a social thing anymore at that point. It was a it was a painkiller at that point, and then it became an addiction, and then it it was such a horrific experience. And to this day, I got to say, I still drink alcohol to this very day. I love whiskey to this day, and I still drink whiskey, but I do it I do it on a very controlled scale. I control it very well now. Now I do it for a social thing.
That's very powerful to be able to have that control, because I know people personally that they are what you call high functioning alcoholics. So basically they drink only, say for example, on a weekend. But when they drink on a weekend, it's total plastered. Monday to Friday, that person would not even touch a drink. If you offer them, they're like, no, thank you, I have to work tomorrow. But for any time Saturday and Sunday comes, that's it. Just pissed. And what happens is that you find that they don't have that control to be able to not even do it on the weekend, because that is what you call a high functional alcoholic. And in your case, no, you were using alcohol to numb the pain, and you have said openly that you were addicted to it. But to be able to have the control to just do it in a social setting shows, I would say, a true show of strength, because most people listening to this that have struggled with alcohol don't have that ability. If they touch it, they're gone. It's back to the old ways of it. Because I even have clients that are alcoholics, and they've not drunk for years and years and years, and they say, Todd, straight, if I touch it, that's me, I'm gone. And this is why they turn to things like exercise, so that they have like a different quotation marks addiction, because you need to replace one addiction with another, or I should say, let me use a better word, one habit with another habit, because addiction has a little bit of a negative connotation where it's out of control.
Yeah.
But if you use a more positive word like a habit, it means then that you can remove one bad habit for a more positive habit, So you publicly push for the importance of releasing grudges.
Yes. Yep.
What did unforgiveness cost you in ways most men massively underestimate?
What did unforgiveness cost me? Oh my goodness, gosh. It costed. Here's how I'll say that. It cost me my life. And what I mean by that is it cost me freedom. Unforgiveness cost me freedom in every area of my life. When I started forgiving and truly understanding the power of forgiveness for myself, forgiving myself and other people that had wronged me, and forgiving myself for people that I had wronged, every area in my life became lighter and more freeing, happier. I became happier in every area of my life. I became so light, way more lighthearted. I looked at life differently in every area of my life, everything. It's like doors opened for me financially, spiritually, mentally, physically. Everything just changed. It was costing me my life. I always say it this way: forgiveness saved my life. It literally saved my life. I was told by a spiritual mentor, and not everybody is spiritual, not everybody reads the Bible. That's fine. I don't care. I mean, it's what we have to understand is there is a higher power that we have to connect to, whatever that looks like for whoever's listening. I mean, it's whether you believe in God or you believe in a higher power or whatever, the creator of the earth, etc. I believe there's a higher power that we have to connect to have true freedom. Because if we hold on to unforgiveness and hatred and grudges, it's negative energy. It's negative. I always say that, we can feed the negative ball of energy, or we can feed the positive ball of energy that's in our spirit. There's both in there. And they both want to be fed. But a lot of times we gravitate towards feeding the negative ball of energy instead of the positive ball of energy, because for myself, in my own experiences in life, I figured out that we gravitate first towards the negative instead of gravitating towards the positive like we should. Because gravitating towards the negative is easier because society around us in general focuses on the negative. We are conditioned to focus on the negative, and we are conditioned that holding grudges and unforgiveness and revenge is okay. It's sold as okay in society. It's sold as okay in the political world. It's sold as talking shit behind someone's back. When someone's not in the room, we can talk crap about them. It's okay. And that's negative. That you're feeding that negative ball of energy. And what happens is that holds you back in every area of life. But if we don't teach the next generation, if you will, how that negative and positive, work in your life, if we don't teach the next generation, we don't teach our children, or whoever else that you're influencing around you, if we don't teach them the correct way to release and move on and forgive and the power of forgiveness, they might never understand. I used to not understand it. I mean, I was, in my 20s, in my 30s, before I really figured out the power of forgiveness. I mean, I was, 30 years old before I really started even figuring it out a little bit, the power of forgiveness. Nobody ever really taught me.
Yeah, and the thing is, this is why I talk to people like you on this show, and I've gone very deep into the subconscious mind and trauma and stuff, because what people don't really realize is that your past determines your future and who you are in the present and the now. And most trauma comes from the childhood, right? And it can start as early as even in the womb. Because if your mother had traumatic experience while she was pregnant with you, it means then that you carry that in your genome through the epigenetics. So forgiveness is really, really powerful, because it means that you can break that emotional connection to said thing or said things, which then gives you the liberation from the thing, because everything is energetic. And just like sex, money, power, all of these things are energetic. So this is why we need to focus on the internal journey, because that is what determines the external journey. So let's shift gears now and talk about those same said things: sex, power, money. Now, from what you've lived and what you now see in other men, where do sex, power, and money often stop being tools and start being masters?
Where do sex, power, and money start being masters?
Yeah, stop becoming tools and start becoming masters, i.e. controlling you.
If you tap into, first of all, if you tap into using your influence, which can be your power, your influence, your power. If you start using your power and your influence for sowing good seeds into other people, and what I mean by good seeds is sowing good seeds, teaching other men, teaching other young people how to make good choices in life. Teach them what true forgiveness looks like and what it can do for you. That is when you really start I believe that's one area that you can start using power as a master, because you're influencing the rest of society in a positive way. So therefore, you're going to start reaping good because you're doing good for society. Now, because when you teach other people how to do good in society and not hurt other people with your power or your influence, that's one way you can do it. And sex becomes a crazy thing, kind of. It's sex, power, and money are the three things. It's because what I'm seeing now is everybody wants to. I shouldn't say everybody, not everybody. Some of the younger generation now wants to normalize seeing how many like boys teenagers want to normalize, at least in from what I've seen, they want to normalize seeing how many women they can have sex with while they're teenagers. Like they call it their body count, right? They call it their body count. What's your body count? It's a thing. And it's like
amongst men, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Especially amongst men. What you're doing is you are you're using sex in a dirty, negative way. You're sowing bad seeds in the sexual realm, if you will. So if we could shift that and make it our master instead of an addiction and a egotistical, arrogant, bad thing, by they're demonizing sex by doing it like that. In order to make it your master, in my own experience, is find one woman and date her for however long you need to get to know her, and then marry her and make that your woman. That's your lifetime sex partner. I mean, if you want if you want to go see how often you can have sex with someone with the opposite, if a man wants to go see how many women he can go have sex with, go find one woman and see how many times you can have sex with her, and make it better and better and better as you get to know each other better, right? That's my experience.
I agree with you, but this is the thing, and I think that we need to confront the elephant in the room. Men are hardwired to want to procreate and spread their seed. So I think that it should be done responsibly. Absolutely. I was 18 as well, and that was the thing. Now I'm a lot more calm, where I believe it's better to have someone more serious in your life, because you lose a lot of time chasing endless women. So I think that as you get older, you realize your priorities change. But I mean, now looking back, I think it's probably just part of the process, man. I think for a man, not every man, but I do think that if a man, when he's young, has a lot of women in a responsible way and not be having loads of children with women, I think that as he gets older, maturity tends to set in, where you tend to not gravitate to that so much anymore, right? Because men have testosterone, and the more testosterone a man has, the more he wants to have sex with multiple women. And even if you look at the animal kingdom, right? Like, humans are the only species really that tend to think that we have to have one woman. Whether that is right or wrong, I'm just saying this is how the society has conditioned us. When we look in the animal kingdom, the lion, he has a pride. His job is to protect the pride, and he has a lot of lionesses, right?
Yeah.
And he has loads of children from them. So I do think that part of it is biological. But at the same time, I do think that there needs to be responsibility practiced where, one, you don't be impregnating 5, 6, 7, 8 women, because that's one of the bad examples that some men do. And then two, at least if you can just have fun, tell people, well, look, we're just having fun, so that people understand that's what it is. So I do think there's a bit of nuance. And at the same time, I do agree with you where if you have a wife, then you just have loads of fun with her, right? So I think two things can be true at the same time, is my point.
Yeah. It's the thing that happens is it gets.
It gets complicated because there's a lot of nuance to it, right?
Because I was young once too.
Right.
I was 18. I remember how I was when I was 18. I wanted to have sex all the time. And
absolutely, like 5, 6 girls, you know what I mean? Like one every day, you know what I mean? That's just how it was. Because when you're 18, your testosterone levels are so high that that's all you want to do, right? So that's why I said there's a bit of nuance to it, where I do think that, especially like as a man, you should be telling your son, okay, all right, son, I'm not going to try to tell you what to do, but if you're going to do these things, let me educate you on the consequences that can happen when you do certain things. Because I do think that complete prohibition doesn't really work, because it goes back almost to like religion. But I'm a fan of sort of like giving you education, giving you the consequences that happen. So if you can do these things, be responsible so that you don't jeopardize your future, you know what I mean, by just having lots of baby mamas, right? At the same time, it's kind of challenging to tell an 18-year-old guy who's got more testosterone than at any other time in his life to not look for girls, right? So is this thing here, that I think there's a bit of balance required, but I'm a firm believer of education, given so you can make better choices. So if you do things, you understand the consequences. And if there are consequences, you have to accept responsibility for the consequences. And I think that way is a lot more powerful, because at least as a young man, you can't come and say, well, my dad or my coach or whoever is the positive male influence in their life didn't tell me that this would happen. Because if they weren't told, that means they had ignorance. But if they were told and they still did, then this is where it was their choice, So is one of these things that I think, again, I repeat, two things can be true at the same time. But I totally agree with you where, if you have one woman that does it all for you, then make her happy and what's not. So, but again, that comes from maturity, because you're 45, I'm 44, so we're roughly the same age. So our brains think differently now than when we were 18, because we passed through that stage. So this is why I always say that men have to become, and men go through a process to become a man. Because when you're 18, you're literally nothing. You say you never had $100, right? So most men at 18, because they're technically men, adults, no life experience, no understanding the world, no real skills, no money to their name, no nothing, and you have to go there and make loads of mistakes. So I think there has to be some sort of guidance, but still saying, look, if you can do things, just do things in a responsible way. Don't hurt anybody, and don't be going out there making children unnecessarily,
Yeah.
So what is the difference between a man using his power to protect and lead versus using power to hide insecurity?
What the difference is? I mean, to hide insecurity with your power, a lot of times I say it like this, it's insecurity is often really loud, and true power and stable power is usually more confident. confident and maybe a little more subtle. You know, a lot of times when someone is insecure, when a man is insecure, he's constantly wanting to let the rest of the group know how much he knows about something. But yet, he doesn't have the credentials to back up what's coming out of his mouth. It's a little, I'm trying to think of an example of using your power to hide your insecurity. I've seen where church leaders will preach a good message in front of the pulpit and have all kinds of rules and things that you need to follow, and they preach a good message in front of a pulpit in a church, and while they are battling with insecurity in their own home because his marriage sucks, because his wife might hate him, because he's a narcissistic a-hole, behind closed doors. He's a narcissistic a-hole to his wife or to his children. And he's insecure. Therefore, he's trying to act all polished and get his followers to follow all his rules and preach a good message so that they don't notice how narcissistic he is behind closed doors. He's covering up an insecurity by being loud, by being like ruling with an iron hand, with the iron fist. He's ruling with the iron fist so that people don't see what's really going on because he's insecure. That's one thing that I've seen firsthand. I've seen that. The other way that I've seen it is with employers. Some employers are very domineering to their employees. Very, well, I write your paycheck. You need to do what I say because I'm writing your paycheck. Therefore, you need to do what I say. And they do it with a very domineering energy, very controlling energy, instead of leading by example. They push it. They push it on their employees to follow all the rules and stuff if you're going to work here, because he has an insecurity. Maybe he has an alcohol addiction behind closed doors when he's not at work. And he's covering that up by leading, or not even leading, by controlling his employees, by being very domineering, instead of leading with a confident, with real confidence, leading his employees and teaching his employees how to be better, making them want to come to work, making a good workplace for them to work at, helping them to learn new skills, and asking questions on what he can do to make the workplace better instead of pushing it on him. You have to do this if you're going to work here. Ask better questions, like ask your employees, what can I do to make this a better workplace for you and the rest of the employees? And then shut up and hear them, hear what they have to say. And then have a man-to-man discussion instead of I'm the boss. You're going to do what I say. It doesn't matter what you say. I'm the boss. That's an insecurity a lot of times. Not always, but a lot of times that's an insecurity that he's hiding that maybe no one knows about. Maybe someone knows about it, but it's not public. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I agree, because I think as a person that is a boss and has employees, I think one of the best things to do is to allow people to have freedom in their job role, right? And to express themselves. And you set up clear like rules and responsibilities and stuff that they know what they have to do, but you give them the ability to come into that role, to create, to innovate in that role and stuff, instead of you telling them how it should be and trying to micromanage, right? Because when you ask them, okay, if what would you do, for example, to improve XYZ in your position, so you can get feedback. And sometimes they come up with really good ideas, and that can actually help the business to grow and to improve, right? But if you can just be like a dictat, it generally doesn't work, because that's coming from a place of security and little man syndrome. And, we can use all different analogies to express that understanding, So you've publicly said ego kills all relationships. How often is what men call strength actually just wounded ego with better branding?
It's okay. Say that again. You said ego is wounded.
No. So you've publicly said ego kills all relationships. How often is what men call strength actually just wounded ego with better branding?
Wounded ego with better branding.
Basically just dressing up the insecurities,
Yeah. One area, one thing that I guess I could say is, if we have to constantly show, we constantly got to show off to the world all of our glamour, if you will, and constantly try to how would I say? Sometimes I see marketing, if you will, the way people market, like you said, better branding. They market to the public with all their glamour and and they have their identity wrapped up in how they look, to the world. They wouldn't ever get caught in the public eye. How would I say it? Like I'm not clean shaved right now, right? Like I haven't shaved for a few days, and I could have shaved before we did this this podcast today, but I didn't, because I don't care. I know who I am without having to put up I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, it's like I used to care so much about the car or the truck or the vehicle that I drive to my customer's house, because I had to look good. I had to look professional. I had to look all polished. I had to look a certain way. And don't get me wrong, it's good to look professional, but the way you carry yourself with confidence, your demeanor, your body language is way more important than what you drive, is what I've learned in business. Ego can also be, how do I say this? Ego can be, you constantly gotta name drop. You constantly got to be name dropping. Like, I know this guy, I know this celebrity, or I talked to this celebrity. And you got to let the people in the room with you know that you know these important people, to feed your ego. You do it to feed your ego. You do it to make yourself somehow feel more important than the rest of the people in your group or whatever, by name dropping. It's You know, it's good to be professional and show up like a professional and care about your branding, be known what you're known for. Of course it is. But if we do it to impress other people that we don't even like, what's the point? That's not true authenticity. I mean, it's
what you're describing is pretty much social media, because everyone puts up a facade on social media to show everyone how great their life is.
yeah.
Look at me, how handsome I am, how beautiful I am. Look at my body. And deep down inside, they're very, very hollow. So now, if a man has money, status, influence, and options, but no peace, no discipline, and no inner freedom, what has he actually built?
Yeah. It's interesting you say it in that way, because he really hasn't built anything but a facade and a facade that nobody wants to be a part of. Because if you hang around him very long, you're going to see what he actually is behind closed doors. Back when I was $1 million in debt, and it was bad debt, it wasn't good debt, it wasn't backed by assets, it wasn't backed by investments, if you will, it was bad debt. Back then, my ego was so big, I had to always show up in public with all the glamour, the fake confidence, the big truck that I drove, my car that I drove, my truck that I drove had a big fat payment attached to it. But it looked good. And the public didn't know that I was one payment away from losing that truck from my business. Like there was times when I was behind on my payments and I was almost to lose it. But it looked all shiny and glamorous when I showed up. I showed up with the nicest, everything. It looked like it was very well put together, but I was hollow on the inside. When I got home that night, I was literally trying to figure out how I'm going to make my payment next week so that the truck doesn't get repoed. And my wife hated me because I was a narcissistic a-hole that was an alcoholic. But the public didn't know that, because I showed up with fake confidence and shiny clothing, and everything, looked good, but it wasn't good. What did he really build? That's the question you ask. What are you really building when you're hollow inside and you have a shiny, glamorous profile on social media? What's the point?
True. It's pretty much nothing you've built. It's almost like building your house on sand, as it says in scripture. You know what I mean? So guys, we can take a short break here to say, if this conversation is hitting home, share it with one man who is still trapped by anger, debt, addiction, ego, and a life that looks strong on the outside but feels wrong on the inside. And if you're getting value from this, hit that like button, subscribe to the Conscious Man 7 podcast, and drop a comment telling us one form of bondage you most need to break. This helps this message reach the people who most need to hear it. Follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246, at the Conscious Man 7 podcast, or Todd Cave on Facebook to see what we get up to during the week, to see how I merge fitness, consciousness, and spirituality to help people not only get into the best shape of their lives, but also level up in other areas of their life. Don't forget to check out the sponsor of our show, The Kembo, at thekembo.com. Get yourself some cool orgonite pyramids, tower busters, and jewelry, which create orgone energy, which is the life source energy and neutralizes the nasty EMF waves that we are constantly bombarded with. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. Now back to Glenn. You and your wife said you paid off $1 million of bad debt. What changed first? Was it your habits, your standards, your identity, or your willingness to face what was true?
I would say my habits changed, and also willing to face what was the truth. And I would say the main reason why I chose to change my habits is because I either had to do something. I had to commit suicide or face the truth. That's where I was at. That's really where I was at. I was suicidal, and my wife was suicidal as well. And
Wow, together.
yeah, we were both suicidal, and several different times. Actually, at several different times in our life, we were both suicidal. Together sometimes, and then a couple other times we were suicidal at different times of our life. But there was times when we were suicidal at the same time. And what I figured out is, at this point in my life, when I had $1 million in debt in 2011, I figured out that if I don't change something, I either have to change my habits and face the truth, or commit suicide. And the main reason that I did not commit suicide was because of my children. I remember thinking that I can't commit suicide because of my children, and I can't leave my wife and divorce her because of my children. My children were really more the saving grace for me than anything else in my life at that point in time. If it was not for my children, then I more than likely would have chosen to divorce my wife or commit suicide, or both, if it wasn't for my children. But because of my children, I cared more about my children than I did anything else at that point in my life. So I had to face the truth. I had to change my habits, and because I didn't care about my wife. I didn't love my wife. I did not love my wife. I did not. She was in my way. She was in my way.
Wow.
So, that's just that's just the truth. And I didn't really love my children, but at the same time, there was just something about my children that I just couldn't quite, I don't even know how to explain it. I couldn't quite let go. I couldn't quite let go. And I made a promise to my wife that I would stop drinking excessively. And I started feeling a little bit of freedom. I started getting a little bit of clarity, spiritual and mental freedom, when I made that choice. And it was a feeling that I hadn't had forever. Like, it felt like I had never had that feeling that I could remember. The mental freedom that I got when I made that choice, that conscious choice of changing my habits and facing the truth. It brought, it made me confident. It made me feel like a man. It made me feel like I matter. It made me feel like I had a voice. I don't even know why. It made me feel like I had a voice. It made me feel like I mattered when I made that conscious choice to change my habits, to face the truth. But I will say this: there's times now, to this very minute, when I hit a hard place in my business, or I hit a hard place in my marriage or finances, etc., the habits come whispering back to this day. the thoughts, I should say, the thoughts come whispering back of the old habits and addictions that I used to have. They're still alive and still real, but they don't carry nearly as much. How would I say? They don't really control me, because I know the outcome. I know the the type of fulfillment that they don't bring. I know the hollow feeling that it brings if I dabble in that thought too long. I know the hollow feeling that I will get and the path of destruction that will come right after I entertain those thoughts. But it's still hard. It's still hard some days. It still is hard some days. But it's not that bad. There is days when gambling is another thing for me. Like gambling is something that I battle with still. I still battle with it. But I know that if I let myself in too deep, it will bring that hollow feeling. It will bring that hollow feeling. My marriage will be destroyed. My finances will be destroyed. I know that. So it's just, when you know what you know, and you know where you've been, and you know where you're going, you just know. You know.
Okay. So, what is the difference between chasing a quick financial win and building a life of lasting prosperity?
What the difference is?
Yes.
The difference is you can dream as big as you want to, and you know that your finances can back up your dream. When you chase when you chase instant gratification in your finances, versus long-lasting prosperity, financial decisions that create long-lasting prosperity, you can dream as big as you want to. The sky is the limit, and you know that your finances can back up your dream. And just like and the feeling of confidence that it gives you. Real wealth is not just money either. It's being healthy. Being healthy. Real wealth is health. Is being healthy enough to enjoy your financial freedom. Like flying helicopter. Like I'm training. I'm training to fly helicopter. I've been training for several years now, and it's a very expensive hobby. But it's very fun. It's very fun to fly above. Fly above all. I mean, you feel so free. You feel spiritually and physically, mentally free when you're flying in a helicopter, and you are the one that is flying it. You are the one that is flying the helicopter. It's such a great feeling. It's like you're above all. But it's really hard. It's a really hard thing to learn. It's a really hard thing to learn.
And the thing is, the most things that are the most difficult are the things that give you the most fulfillment, joy, happiness, and stuff like that. And I guess it's a allegory for life, because to live life at its fullest and to have its glory, there are a lot of challenges that you need to overcome. And most people shy away from those challenges, which is why most people suffer in life, you know? So your public work covers business, finance, debt freedom, and generational wealth. What money mistakes do men keep repeating because shame keeps them in avoidance?
Wow. because shame keeps them in avoidance. I think part of what makes men make bad money decisions, bad financial decisions, one is they don't feel worthy. They do not feel worthy of achieving true freedom in their finances and in their health, in their marriage, in business. They don't feel worthy. They remind themselves subconsciously or consciously of their past mistakes. So therefore, they say, well, I could never do that, or I could never achieve that because I don't have the skills, or I don't have the knowledge, or I don't I'll just settle, because in their mind they think that instant gratification is better than long-lasting gratification, long-lasting success. The thing that keeps them in shame is, for me, one thing that kept me in shame for a long time was knowing that I made bad choices in business early in my life, of people that I wrote bad checks to or whatever. They know that, and they'll never forget that. I told myself that some of those people will never forget that you wronged them. So therefore, just don't. You'll never become or be anything much to speak of that's worth talking about, because you wronged so many people earlier in your life, and therefore you'll never rise up and above that. I was ashamed of that. I was ashamed of my alcohol addiction. I was ashamed of stepping out on my wife, having an affair on my wife. I was ashamed of that. I was afraid that people would find out of all those things, not understanding that if I just admit it to the world and put it in a book, literally, I put those things, my shame, I wrote it in a book, because I finally figured out that if I expose my shame to the world, then the dark side has nothing to hold over my head anymore, because I exposed it all. There's nothing to say anymore. There's nothing that somebody can say, well, I know something that you don't want me to tell the public. No, you don't, because I already put it in a book and I sold the book on a public market. You ain't got shit on me.
That's one way to face yourself in a mirror, for sure. So, where do most men often trade integrity for money and then wonder why success feels like bondage?
Trade integrity for money, and then why does success feel like bondage? I, that's a loaded question. I think that trading integrity for money and success, I think it comes back to feeding your ego and instant gratification, thinking that you're above the law of reaping and sowing, really. I mean, there was a point in my life when I thought that I could break the law of reaping and sowing, that I could somehow make enough money to break that law. But you can't. You can't break it long term, the law of reaping and sowing. You can break it for a short term, but that's not really breaking it. That's really not. You're just overriding it for a short term. I've seen people override it I don't really know why men would do it besides for instant gratification. I know that's what I do if I'm in the moment sometimes of making a decision that is integrity based or non-integrity based. I want instant gratification. I want the pain to go away. I just want life to be easier right now. And if I jeopardize integrity and I trade off integrity for instant gratification, that it makes the pain go away. It makes life less painful because the human mind forgets quickly. And it's the human mind can be so deceiving if you allow it to be deceiving. It's like the shirt I wear sometimes. It says, "Do you control your mind or does it control you?"
That's a
It's
very interesting statement, to be honest with you, because the mind creates a lot of stories out of nothing.
yeah, yeah, it does, and it's just it can be so hard to look past that instant gratification because for myself, I constantly want instant gratification. I constantly want instant gratification. I just it's like when that instant gratification wears off, I'll just go make another decision that's instant gratification. I'll just continue down that path. But then finally, I realized earlier in my life, like years ago, that you're constantly in crisis management mode. If you make constant instant gratification decisions, you're constantly managing a crisis of some sort in your life.
Okay. So you have over 25 years in business and more than 26 years in marriage. What did marriage teach you that business never could?
Man, what marriage taught me that business never could? One thing that I would say, because of my mindset about marriage, because divorce was never really an option for me. One thing that it taught me is if divorce is not an option, then I can't file bankruptcy or just fire my wife, right? I can't just fire her and get a new one if divorce is not an option. I can fire a customer. I can walk away from a customer and tell him to wad up the contract and get rid of the contract, even if he still owes me money. And I don't want to work for him anymore because it's just such a bad, it's just bad. It's such a bad thing. I'll just nullify the contract. Or I'll finish the contract and never work for him again. I can't do that with my marriage if divorce is not an option. Now, if divorce is an option, I don't really know how to answer it if divorce was an option because I chose to not divorce years ago when my marriage was so bad. When I hated my wife, I chose to not divorce her when I could have. What it taught me is I can get mad at a customer and drop him like a hat and just never talk to him again and go over here and find new customers to work for, new clients to work for, and still stay in business. If I drop my wife and find a new wife, but divorce is not an option, then I'm going to be careful what I tell my wife, what I speak into her, verbally, mentally, physically. If she's going to stay my wife, then I'm going to be careful what I tell her because I got to live with that. I don't have to live with my customers. I got to live with my wife. I don't have to live with my customers. So it's, I figured out that I got to make divorce an option if I want to treat my wife the way I treat my customers, because I can, like I said, I can fire my customers. I can get rid of my customers and never work for them again. But if I'm not going to divorce my wife, then I have to face the truth about myself and about her. And this, like, because here's the deal. Whatever we sow into our wives, if you're a man, you're married to a female, to a woman, whatever we sow into her, she will multiply. So if I sow bad seeds into her, verbally, physically, mentally, she will multiply it and feed it back to me. That's my experience in marriage. Because women are mothers. They procreate. They create what you give them. They're like a garden. They create what you give to them as a man and give it back to you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the thing is that relationships are very good teachers of who you really are, because a partner, a husband, wife, whichever situation it is, they only show you what is actually inside of you because of the triggers that you have with them. So if they trigger something in you, that means then that is an area that you need to examine in yourself. You have to look at yourself in the mirror, which is why you said you have to be careful what you sow into them, because in fact, you're actually sowing it into yourself, because she's a representation of you, you're a representation of her. So if you're triggering each other, it means that both of you have aspects of yourself that are either unhealed, have trauma, unforgiven, or just denied or left in a corner to not look at, and just looking in another part of the room instead of realizing that there's a whole heap of rubbish on the floor over there, So I do agree with that. So what does a conscious man owe his family beyond money, provision, and protection?
Beyond money, you said?
Beyond money, provision,
And protection.
and protection.
Money, provision, protection. I mean, beyond that, it's being physically healthy, I guess, would be one thing. I mean, you can't provide and protect in the way that you should if you're not physically capable, mentally capable. And we have to be careful what we feed our mind, because it's going to be really hard to stay physically physically fit, if you will, if we feed our mind bad thoughts continuously, because we're going to act on those thoughts eventually. So we need to feed our mind good thoughts, positive thoughts, confident thoughts, and sow good seeds into our mind so that we can provide and protect.
And what about leadership then? Setting an example and, being strong so that they can look up to you. Because the reason where I was going with that question is that men are the ones really that have to set the example in society. This is why we are men. We are physically stronger. We are able to withstand more stress than a woman. Can a woman withstand stress? Absolutely, she can. But men are more built for it. This is why we are able to do physical hard labor, right?
Yeah.
So my sort of line of thinking with that question was like leadership, because we don't have role models. We don't have leaders anymore. We have a bunch of beta males and a bunch of yes men. So, I was just wanted to get your thoughts on what more should we provide in your opinion.
I call that being a weak suck with being a yes man. You're a weak suck. You're a weak sucker. You're a weak-minded sucker. Because when we're a yes man, that's a form of instant gratification too, because we don't want to face conflict. We don't want to face the disagreeing or the conflict with the other person if we say, no, you can't do that. You're not going to cross this path. This is my boundary. You're not going to cross this. We're going to face resistance if we do that as men. But we don't have to do it. We don't have to do it in a cocky way or in an arrogant way. We just got to do it in a way that is, this is my boundary. This is what goes inside my home, inside my jurisdiction. This is like the lions do in the jungle. I mean, they're the king of the jungle. You're not going to cross them and their boundaries in their domain, if you will. Men don't know how to protect their domain anymore because they don't know how to lead. They don't have role models. Society has broken down the men in society. So, and the other thing that I see is another reason why men don't lead and protect the way they should and put up boundaries is because women have overstepped their boundaries. But the question I always have is, why did women overstep? Why did the women start overstepping the men's boundaries, the men's leadership roles? I mean, maybe because the men didn't lead correctly anymore, so the women stepped up by default. But the other thing is, society has encouraged it. Society has encouraged women to step up and take the role. And I believe there's a reason. The reason why they did that is so that they can make us men weaker, so that they can get their agenda in place. The elite, if you will, the elite's agenda is to weaken the families and weaken the men so that we're more controllable as a society.
Yeah, I totally agree, because you find that strong societies have strong men, weak societies have weak men. And when the man is taken out of the house, and when the man has become a beta male, it means then that he has no boundaries and he will just accept everything, So, yeah, I do think that men have a responsibility to become the best version of themselves, stay on their mission, also do a lot of work on themselves, because it is not just a matter of protecting and providing and having money. You actually have to still walk the inner journey. And that comes from finding purpose in life. And when as a man you find your purpose, it means then that your whole surroundings, your environment changes, because your friends will change. The woman in your life would be a different type of a woman that you will attract. And then your children will become different as well, because they will have way more respect for you. And even if you and the mother don't make it, as long as you are a good role model for the children, they will come up and say, well, at least my dad treated me this way and he treated my mother that way, and that's good. And this is what we men need to do. We need to set the example, and then also push back against tyranny that is occurring right now in the world. So your public message talks about legacy and generational impact. Which cycles were you most determined to make sure ended with you?
Which cycles was I most determined? One cycle was having the false humility mindset. And what I mean by that is, when someone gives you a compliment and it's authentic, it's an authentic, true compliment that you are good at this, or you tell your wife or your sister or your mom that they're really good at a meal that they prepared, at cooking. They cooked a really good meal, and you compliment them on it, and they don't accept the compliment. They just like, no, it's not that good. It must have been by mistake, because I'm not that good. I'm not. I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. I hated that statement growing up. I didn't really hate it while I was growing up, but later, after I was an adult looking back, I realized that that's false humility. And in order to have true success in life, you have to be able to accept and receive a compliment. You don't have to be arrogant and prideful about it, but you can receive it and own your skills. Be like, thank you. I received that. I appreciate that. Thank you for the compliment. And then leave it at that. Don't push away the compliment, because that's a poverty mindset. You'll never rise up if you don't accept the skills that your God-given skills. If you don't accept your skills, God will never raise you up to a higher level either in your talent. If you don't accept what he already gave you, if you push it away and say, I'm not that good, you're never going to rise up to your true destiny, your true identity, if you don't accept that. That was one thing that I was determined to break. And the other thing, the other mindset that I was determined to break in my family line was to figure out how to manage money correctly and not make it be cool, if you will, to be broke. I grew up in my family and friends, etc., the people that I grew up with, they almost like were prideful if they were broke and didn't have a lot of money. They thought it was a good thing somehow. They almost made it a
Identity?
Do what?
An identity?
Yeah. They wrapped their identity around being broke, being around not having a lot of money. Like it was a cool thing, like it was an okay thing. It was just, the comments that they made, they'd always say, like my mom and dad would always say, well, I can't afford that, or we can't afford that. We will never afford that. We will never have this, or we're not those people. We don't have that because we've had a lot of health problems and we have a lot of doctor bills to pay. We'll never have any money. Okay. If you keep saying that, then you will never have any money. You will always be broke. If you own it that you're broke and you'll always be broke, then you will always be broke. And I didn't want to live that life. I didn't want to live that lifestyle. I was determined to have more in life. But I figured out that I created my own reality. If I say that I'm broke and I make it a cool thing, then I will always be broke because I'm creating my own reality with my own words. And I'm still to this day determined to continue to maintain that with my children and for generations to come, to teach them that stop living in a lack mindset. Stop living in a lack mindset, but don't focus on the lack. Focus on what you want. Focus on the positive. Focus on what you want, because you'll get more of what you want. Whatever you focus on, you'll get more of.
Absolutely. And basically, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that is a form of self-sabotage, So when your children or the people closest to you look back at your life, what do you most hope they say money could never buy?
What I would say is things that money can't buy is I want them to see how I love my wife, how I treat my wife, whether we have money or not. Like, I want them to know that you have to show love to the people around you, even if they don't have money. Because sometimes I've seen where people will treat you differently if you have money or you don't have money. I've seen where people will do that. If you have money, they treat you completely differently. And I want my children to know that you can love someone, whether he's homeless with no money or he's a billionaire. You can love him the same. And I'm not saying I always do a good job of that, but what I'm always striving to do is have a heart for the underdog that is the underdog in the community, in the circle, because I was the underdog for most of my life. I was not a popular individual in my community, and there's still days now that I'm not popular at all because I didn't come from money. I didn't come from fame and fortune. I had to make my own way. And I want my children to know that you don't treat someone else differently just because they don't have any money. It doesn't mean that you have to go hang out with them on a regular basis and make them be your best friend if you don't want what they have, but you still don't have to despise them, just because they are less than, if you will. Still love them the same.
Okay, so let's get you on this one. For the man listening right now, what does self-conquest actually look like on the ordinary Wednesday, in his thoughts, his habits, his money, and the way he treats the people closest to him?
So, just an ordinary day.
Yep, an ordinary day.
I would say get out of bed and count your blessings. First of all, if you be grateful that you were able to get out of bed that morning. For one, be grateful. As soon as you get out of bed, or even before you get out of bed, count your blessings. Think of something to be grateful for, that you literally woke up. And I don't always do this, but I know that I should do it more. And I try to make so that I give someone throughout the day a compliment that is positive. Whether it's the waitress at the restaurant, or your employee, or your wife, or one of your children, give them a compliment, or something that is positive, to let them know that they matter. And always thank the Creator for waking you up and for your health, even if you're not feeling the best. Even if you feel like you're sick, still thank God that you woke up and you are able to be alive and above ground. I do that every day on a daily basis. That's part of my day. And I usually listen to some sort of scripture in the Bible, whether I listen to it audibly or I read it at least once a day for a few minutes in the morning. And then I usually call numerous customers throughout the day and follow up on my work, schedule, make so that I am achieving my commitments. Making sure that I follow up on my commitments that I might have made the day before or the week before, or make so that I do the best that I can to stay in touch with not being able to make all my appointments. Like today, I didn't make my appointment, right on time with you. Like, I was 30 minutes late, but I had sent you an email, saying that, hey, we need to adjust the time a little bit, because my day I was dealing with a lot of today was one of those days I was dealing with a lot of mental thoughts that should have not been in my mind. And I literally believe that it was because we were going to have this conversation today. I really think that's why I battled today, because we were going to have this podcast today. I dealt with a lot of mental garbage trying to come into my brain and take my time, take my space. My day was like, just, it's like I couldn't keep up, and I couldn't satisfy my mind enough today. And usually when that happens, I know that something good that society doesn't want you to be a part of is about to happen.
Okay. So basically, if I interpret what you said is that for the man listening today right now, he needs to take radical responsibility for himself, look at himself in the mirror, and be honest with himself, and to actually self-analyze, because without that, you're not going to make changes in your life, and there will be a lot of stagnation. So, and I think that this conversation today showed people that you can be literally $1 million in debt, suicidal, alcoholism, internal injuries, and still bounce back to be something and to be out there helping people, setting a good example. And also, I think another thing that is very much underrated is forgiveness. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we touched on that in this conversation, because I realized that human beings today, we don't really have real empathy or forgiveness. And when we have empathy and forgiveness, it means that we're able to overcome a lot of our fears and traumas, because these are the things that determine our future, because the actions we take today are based on things that happened in the past. So what's happening is that this is why they say that the past, the present, and the future all exist at the same time, because the actions that you do today create your future, and the actions that you do today are coming from your past. And when you are able to really look at yourself in the mirror and analyze yourself critically and take radical responsibility like you did to get out of the $1 million in debt, be a better father, be a better husband, be a better entrepreneur, and, be responsible. I think that is the message here that, should resonate with all young men and all men for that matter, and even women listening as well. We all have to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we're all flawed. But the thing about it is that we can always redeem ourselves. And like Yeshua said, my Father doesn't want your blood. My Father wants your mercy, and mercy is forgiveness. Glenn, tell the lovely folks at the Conscious Man 7 where they can find you. Tell us about your coaching, and tell us about all the other things that you offer.
Where you can find me is on for one, you can go to my website, royalty-coaching.com. It's royalty-coaching.com. That's my website for my coaching website. And you can find my book. You can find my book online on Amazon, A Warrior's Path to Freedom. You can find it on Amazon. It's easy to find on there. Just, get on Amazon and put in the A Warrior's Path to Freedom, and it'll pop up. And then also, you can find me on social media, on Instagram, just under my name, Glenn Beechy, GLENNBEECHY. Or on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook on my personal page, and then you can also find me Warriors Creed Facebook page that I share some things on, Warriors Creed. And then also on my YouTube channel under my name. I have a YouTube channel under Glenn Beechy. You can find me on there as well. And then I'm also the owner of a construction company, BeechyConstruction.com. You can see on there a lot of things that I've done over the last 25, 26 years, a lot of projects and stuff. You can kind of get to know me a little bit on there, on what I do on a daily basis in business. And I love to coach other men and teenagers. I love to coach other other men and women. I'll coach women too, but I like to coach men, you know, to make society a better place.
Absolutely. And guys, to echo what Glenn said, we need to actually do work on ourselves. And when we do work on ourselves and we get coaches and mentors that are there setting an example and helping people, you should answer your call. And this is your call here now. I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. So if you would like to level up all aspects of your life, mentally, physically, and spiritually, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name Todd Cave on Facebook. Send me a message. Let's have a chat and let's see if you're a good fit for the Compound Body Training Army. If you are on a spiritual journey or you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. And they're also good for people with PTSD and CPTSD. So hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name Todd Cave on Facebook. Send me a message and I'll help you to get some magic mushrooms. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by visiting our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link to the Amazon store, Todd and me, will be in the description of this podcast. And if you also are listening to this podcast on one of the podcast platforms and you simply don't like ads because these podcast platforms have a lot of ads, you can consider becoming a member of our Patreon or locals community. You'll get early releases to all of our podcasts. You'll get direct access to me as I get loads of messages on social media and I reply to those messages on Patreon first. So if you would like to support this podcast, because it's only for a few bucks a month, you help us out with things like editing, researching guests like Glenn and other guests that come on the show, as well as you would get direct access to me and you would get ad-free experience on Patreon or Locals. Link to the Patreon or Locals community will be in the description of this podcast. And lastly, don't forget to check out the sponsor of our show, The Kembo, at thekembo.com. Go over there and show some love to The Kembo and get yourself some cool organite pyramids, tower busters, and also jewelry to get rid of those nasty EMF waves and also help with the chemtrails. She has a lot of research on her website that you can see more information on this. So use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. If this episode gave you something real, like this episode, subscribe to the Conscious Man 7 podcast and send this to one man who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell us the one bondage you most need to break. Anger, money, ego, addiction, identity, family, or legacy. Those conversations matter, and they help this episode reach the people it is meant for. Glenn, many thanks for being a guest on the Conscious Man 7 podcast. This was an interesting conversation.
Yes.
To all the Conscious Man 7 family around the world, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for supporting the mission, and thank you for choosing to look inside of you to heal as it creates a ripple effect in the world. This was another episode of the Conscious Man 7 podcast, the place where we go beyond the veil in search of the truths that they hide from you to help you reclaim your power and to step into the truest version of yourself. You are the help that you've been looking for. So remember, folks, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.